In this talk, I'll be talking about scientific writing, and this is part 2. I'll focus on writing grants. I'm Raj More from Duke University School of Medicine. Let's get started. Grants. What are grants and why do we write them? They're basically written proposals to communicate the research you're planning to do. Researchers will propose a project in a document called a grant, which is submitted to a funding agency. The funding agency will then review the grant and judge the grant and decide whether they're going to fund it, which means pay the researchers the money they need to do the project. And these grants usually come from the federal government, at least in the US. That could be the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation. They could be from nonprofit organizations or foundations like American Heart Association. They could also be from military branches like the Army or the Navy or the Department of Defense. Grant funding is awarded competitively. That means there's a limited number of funding and there's a lot more applications than there's available funding. So there are a host of selection criteria, including how innovative is your grant? What is the potential that your research holds for scientific advancement? What is its significance and impact on the field? And what is the feasibility of completing the project that you proposed as written and designed? And the selection also depends on what the agency is wanting to fund. So if you're funding something they're interested in, you have a better chance of success. Why do we write grants? So scientists need funding to do their research and to answer questions of importance. And the research projects are expensive. They actually require technical expertise, and that's the human capital, which is often most expensive. It uses expensive equipment and materials. And for the scientist, it's a way of advancing not just science, but the scientific career of the scientist. So what goes into making a grant? The main sections of the grant. The first is the specific aims. The background and significance is usually next. Then preliminary findings that you have to support the research you're wanting to do. What kind of innovation are you using? What are the design of your research? What is the design of your research and the methods you're using? What is the budget for the project? What resources and equipment are you using at your institution? And who else is involved in the project and what are their roles? So the first part, and then probably the most important, is the specific aims. So that's like basically the motivation. Why are you proposing the research? What is the goal of the research project? And what questions do you plan or hope to answer? And what are the hypotheses? What do you predict you'll find if you do this research? And this is usually a very concise document. It's usually one page. The next is the background and significance, which describes why your research is important, how it's going to build on the earlier discoveries, and how it'll advance the scientific field that you're in. And then it will recap by the stating the goals of your research and the research questions you're posing. Preliminary findings are very important in most grants, but not all. But in larger grants, usually you have to have preliminary findings and that show what research you've already done to demonstrate that you can carry out what you propose to do. sometimes it can be beneficial to have some findings that support your hypotheses, but at a small scale. And you want to be able to demonstrate that you have the team that is capable of doing this work, research work. You have access to the patients or the mice or the cells or whatever you're going to be working with, whatever equipment you need to work with, and whatever knowledge and expertise and that is needed to carry out the research project. The next big section is the data. Is the design and methods. What are the data you're trying to collect or planning to collect? How are you measuring it? What instruments are you using? What assays are you using to measure those variables? And what is the exact experimental procedures, or what is the experimental manipulation that will help you answer the question? What is your plan to analyze data? We talked about inference. How do you go from the data to the discovery or the knowledge? So that data analysis plan is basically your way, your description of the inference process. And then power analysis. That means, are your statistics and your and the number of samples you propose, are they powerful enough in a statistical way to answer the question you proposed? And what is the timeline for your project? So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go back a little bit to publications and how those impact discovery and how we publicize and disseminate these. And I'm going to just start by introducing this idea of the business of scientific publishing. Surprisingly, or maybe not, publishing science is one of the most profitable business enterprises. And I'm saying that from the point of view of what the rate of return is. What are the profits that the scientific publishing companies accrue in terms of how much costs they have? And this is I think an article in the Guardian that says, staggeringly profitable business of scientific publishing. Is it bad for science? Well, the profit margins are huge. Like I said, Elsevier is the largest publishing house for scientific publishing. They had profits of, in British pounds, 724 million pounds with 2 billion annual revenue. That's a 36% profit margin. That's higher than Apple, Google, or Amazon. And how is that possible? Well, they have zero cost, practically zero cost, because the research is paid for by the federal government and partially, by other entities, but certainly not at all by the publishing house. They have zero cost for reviewing the scientific articles because other scientists volunteer their time, and those scientists are probably being paid by their institutions or by other grants, which is basically taxpayer money. And publisher costs are probably the only costs they incur, which is paying editors, the cost of publishing online and printing, proofing, and copy editing, and doing taking care of subscription management. The subscription costs, which is the cost to pay to buy the journal, are covered mostly by the public because they are these subscriptions are paid for by major research institutions, which get a lot of money from the federal government through the grants. So there's this movement to fight this excessive profiteering by publishing houses. And it's a movement called open science. So what is open science? It's the idea that scientific knowledge should be available to everybody. So it's a movement to democratize access to scientific knowledge, and just so that it's not only in the hands of some few privileged. It's pragmatic. So the idea is that science will progress faster if we work together and knowledge is democratized. It's to build an infrastructure so that efficient research can be performed more efficiently, and by providing tools and platforms for facilitating and supporting the research. And it's prioritizing the public, that science is for everyone, not just for scientists. And it is certainly paid for by the public, so that makes sense. And we need new ways of measuring measuring in science. I talked about some of the currency of science, but scientific impacts needs some new ways of measuring progress. So the goals, some of the goals that we can do to help advance these 5 areas is 1, post all manuscripts on preprint servers when you submit it to a scientific journal. That way it's available to the public, and there's no fees or no cost to, download. You don't have to pay $45 or $65 or whatever. You also, another goal is for researchers to share their results and summary statistics when they submit to a journal. Again, this would be done on some sort of freely accessible platform, and data sharing is, when it's made easier, will help ensure all scientific contributions are recognized. So here is some data from the last 20 years showing the exponential growth of these preprint servers. So the preprint servers are essentially a way to bypass or to partially at least bypass or circumvent the stranglehold that the publishing houses have had. So the light blue is the bioRxiv, which is one that I use quite a bit. But and it shows sort of the exponential rise since about 10 years ago in the use, and where scientists are posting their work to these kinds of open access servers, preprint servers. So when you, this is a paper that published by my lab. It's about alcohol use in adolescence and its effects on the brain. Before it was published in a scientific journal, we uploaded it to bioRxiv, and it was accessible to everybody all over the world. Very much in the spirit of democratizing knowledge. This is what you could download if you went to, or and still can, if you go to bioRxiv. This is the consumption, the exponential growth in the consumption of science, by accessing it on bioRxiv. This is again from the last 10 years or so. And this is the use by, that the first graph is the submission of articles to bioRxiv. This is the number of downloads on bioRxiv, also exponential growth. And this is the breakdown of how various fields in science are accessing, well, are using bioRxiv to deposit scientific publications. And you can see bioinformatics, genomics, genetics, and yeah, evolutionary biology are among the leading ones. Neuroscience is also up there, but relatively little for clinical trials and immunology and biochemistry and cell biology. So lots of work to be done. This is a publication policy. I'm just showcasing. This is from Harvard and Massachusetts General Hospital about making data and results available to the general public. And they say it's absolutely unacceptable that a family seeking information about a child's condition, a researcher in an under-resourced environment, or an independent individual pursuing novel therapeutic ideas in his or her own proverbial garage is prevented from immediate access to these results, even simply to determine whether a new report is relevant. Very compelling. So if you have questions, please feel free to email me. That's my email address, rajendra.more@duke.edu. And thanks for your attention and your interest.